Are your thoughts filled with worries, worst-case scenarios, and outcomes? Do you experience physical symptoms like tightness in your chest or a racing heart rate or an upset stomach? Watch this video and you'll learn more about the emotional, mental, and physical symptoms of anxiety that you can use to identify your own symptoms. By the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding of what anxiety is and what the next steps are to help overcome it. I'm Meredith McKenzie of Parallel Wellness. On this channel, we explore topics that bring clients into our therapy practice every day. You'll find tips and strategies that you can make your own to enhance your everyday life and manage your mental wellness. So subscribe and hit the notification button in the corner so that you don't miss a video. We publish every Wednesday. Today we're going to talk about anxiety. About 40% of the Canadian population says that they have some form of anxiety. That might not be a formal diagnosis, but a lot of us experience those symptoms, whether it's tightness in our chest, racing thoughts, just those feelings that we typically identify with anxiety. So today I'm going to talk about anxiety in general. While the DSM does cover some very specific anxiety disorders, I'm going to talk about anxiety kind of along a continuum and some of the symptoms that might fit into each of the different categories, but really just to give you a sense of some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing that are a worthwhile endeavor for you to check out with your family doctor. Now, it's really important for me to mention that while I am a clinical counselor and I do work with clients on a daily basis who experience symptoms of anxiety, that this video here does not count as an assessment. It's not really going to give you a true sense of whether or not you have anxiety. That can really only best be answered in collaboration with your mental health professional or a family doctor. So I would really encourage you, if you are experiencing some of these symptoms, to make an appointment and have a more comprehensive conversation with that person. But this is a really great place to start, and I'm really hoping that by the end of this video you'll have a better sense of exactly what symptoms you're experiencing, if they are problematic, and how to have that conversation with your doctor so that you're not missing anything in that conversation. Now, some of these symptoms are going to apply to you and some of them may not. And I think that's why it's really interesting to be able to look at the full gamut, really, of what people experience when they experience anxiety. The first symptom I'm going to talk about today is excessive worrying. Excessive worrying for people that experience anxiety looks like a few different things. One, it tends to be disproportionate to the situation that's happening. Clients will often talk about being in different social situations where, things are going generally positively, but by the time they get home at the end of the night, they find that they're really fixated on one part of a conversation or a couple of different interactions, and they find that that keeps circling in their mind, and that they end up spending, where the conversation might have only been 5 to 10 minutes, they end up spending the majority of their evening reliving that experience and thinking it over. And that really tends to, that's kind of the definition of how something is disproportionate. There might also be situations where a person with anxiety gets told it's not a big deal. Everybody goes through that, and where I would not recommend that those are great responses to anybody who's experiencing anxiety, but to the general public or general people who don't experience anxiety, what people with anxiety tend to worry about seems to be bigger and more excessive than they would feel. Another part of excessive worrying that comes up is how intrusive it is. So you might find that you want to be present, you want to be kind of right in the moment, but you keep having these lingering thoughts, or you're trying to get your homework done or focus on something and the thoughts just keep coming in. So these thoughts are really intrusive, and it's hard to get away from them. People often even say, at bedtime, I'd really like to be able to go to sleep and turn my mind off, but the thoughts just keep flooding in. So it's another trait of the excessive worrying that people with anxiety experience. And when you go into your doctor, what they will talk to you about is how long have you been experiencing this and how frequently does it happen. So they usually look at a timeline of 3 to 6 months, as well as how frequently throughout the day, or how many days per week are you experiencing that. And people with anxiety, in most situations, especially if you're experiencing something like generalized anxiety disorder, would say that that probably happens on a daily basis, multiple times a day. Symptom number 2, feeling agitated. So Anxiety impacts us, like the last symptom we just talked about was more of kind of a cognitive mental symptom. This symptom of feeling agitated tends to be more physical, and it occurs because a hallmark of anxiety is that it's an overreaction of the sympathetic nervous system. And that's something I'm going to cover actually in my next video on the fight, flight, and freeze response. So stay tuned for that next Wednesday. But what's happening with the body is the sympathetic nervous system is overworking and is putting us in a situation where our body would be ready to respond as though we're responding to a threat. So the sympathetic nervous system is working really hard, and it causes us to feel on edge. It makes our heart race faster. It gives us this really like tense, kind of like electrified feeling, where you can kind of feel maybe like pulses through your body. You might feel your heart rate really pumping heavily, and it just leaves you with this kind of icky, unsettled, uncomfortable, really edgy feeling. And if anybody who out there has experienced anxiety, if you're feeling that feeling, you know that feeling. And that's one of the ones that kind of just stays with you and helps you or causes you to feel really just unsettled, unwell. And like you just can't get rid of it. So if you're experiencing the symptom of feeling agitated, you will know that it does tend to linger. It's very difficult to get rid of, and that's why I'm going to be covering it in our next video on the fight, flight, and freeze response, so stay tuned for that. Symptom number 3 is feeling restless. So it's beyond that feeling of being on edge, and it's more of a physical feeling or a physical motivation to move. So when you're feeling this restless feeling, you know, often clients will describe feeling like they just want to get up and clean, or it's hard for them to stay in bed because they just feel like they have to be doing something even when they know they would really like to be laying in bed relaxing. People will say that they need to just get out, they need to escape, and this again goes along with that fight, flight, or freeze response, where our bodies are intended to flee, escape from whatever it is that's causing us danger. So anxiety is telling our body that we're in danger in some way, and so that's our response. Now, this is a symptom that not everybody may experience, but it is something that doctors and mental health professionals ask about when they're trying to diagnose anxiety. Symptom number 4. Now, the 4th symptom I'm going to talk about today is the feeling of fatigue. I think in a lot of situations, anxiety and depression, they tend to be interrelated. But what really differentiates this fatigue that's sometimes experienced with depression with the one that's in anxiety is it's really related to the amount of worry or the amount of kind of adrenaline that's pumping through your body on a daily basis when you're experiencing anxiety. You get fatigued. That's a lot of work. Your body always thinks that it's ready to be, you know, fighting or running or, you know, just trying to keep yourself safe and hypervigilant. So the body gets really tired, and so you might find that you're feeling really sluggish in your thoughts, that you just can't think, and you're done, you're at your capacity. But it might also feel like, wow, my body is really drained and I need to take a rest. And when you think about that too, when you're experiencing anxiety, it's either like you're really on or you're really off. And so that's a really challenging symptom to experience with anxiety. Symptom number 5 is difficulty concentrating. Now, you can imagine if your thoughts are really circling around threats or potential threats in your environment, and you're also on a lot, it's really hard for your mind to focus on the things that it really should be focusing on, say work, school, even having a conversation with other people. So you might find that when you're experiencing anxiety, that your mind is really trying to almost multitask, and it's trying to, attend to everything that's happening within it, trying to be vigilant about what's going on in the, surroundings. And then you're also trying to do your math homework. So it's difficult to concentrate when someone experiences anxiety. And that's one of those symptoms too, though, that your doctor might look at and compare to maybe symptoms of ADHD. If you're thinking that you might have ADHD, it's also really helpful to look at, may I have anxiety symptoms, just to differentiate between those two things. Another common and often misunderstood symptom of anxiety is irritability. Irritability is one of those symptoms that I think it can often be misunderstood from an outsider's perspective. The other symptoms of anxiety, for an outsider, you might really want to be supportive and be helpful, and it kind of draws you into wanting to help that person, whereas irritability tends to be the symptom that pushes other people away. And it can be more challenging to understand as an outsider. So let me explain it a little bit. So for someone who's experiencing anxiety, imagine that the body is really overwhelmed. You know, it's always on edge, it's being vigilant, it's being aware of any threats, your thoughts are racing, and you know that really takes a lot of effort for the body to be able to maintain that level of kind of attention. And it's hard to be at your best. It's hard to kind of let the simple things roll off your back in that situation. So irritability is actually a really common symptom of anxiety, especially for people that are, you know, adults and older. And I think that's something that can be really challenging for the people in the person's life to understand and have compassion for. And it may actually be one of the only symptoms that other people observe, or that really, you know, presents itself in a situation that might kind of hinder the interactions with that person. So for example, you know, you're trying your very best to manage all of your symptoms of anxiety, and oftentimes people are quite secretive about experiencing anxiety, or they're trying to manage just in their daily lives, and irritability may be one of those ones that people end up seeing, and I think for a lot of people that can be really surprising, especially for the loved ones of people with anxiety. Now, for those of you watching who already have a diagnosis of anxiety, are there any symptoms that came as a surprise to you? I'd really like to know about them, because it would really help me to explain anxiety to the clients that I work with as well. So if you have a symptom of anxiety that really surprised you, leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it and hear more. The next symptom I'm going to talk about is muscle tension. Now, our bodies are really good at interpreting what's happening in our environment by how our body's feeling. So in some situations, if you're already feeling really tense in your body, perhaps you had a really tough workout and you're holding more tension in your body, or you're feeling maybe a little bit stressed, or you've been concentrating at the computer all day and you've been tensing up your shoulders, the way our bodies can interpret that is that my body is tense, so therefore it must be in some type of dangerous situation. So for anybody who's experiencing anxiety, if you're already having tension in your body, sometimes you can respond to it in a negative way. The other situation would be is when you are feeling anxiety and you've got those other physical sensations going on, that we can clench up and hold our bodies, and that goes back to that fight or flight response, where our bodies are supposed to be ready to either have a combat or to run away or do something to protect ourselves. So we tend to tense up our muscles in order to help prepare for that. Not working out well for anxiety, is it? We actually have a blog article on this written by Ashley Greensmith of our practice at Parallel Wellness, and I'm going to include the link down below for that so that you can have a read of it and try it out, because progressive muscle relaxation is a really great way to help with that body tension, whether or not it's caused by anxiety or your anxiety is responding to that kind of tension that's already in your body. But it's a really great tool, so have a look. Next symptom on our list is either having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. This is a huge and very common symptom that our clients come into our office and talk about, that they're having trouble either falling asleep, so they're laying in bed and they cannot turn their minds off. The day's events are going through their minds, their worries, all the things that they feel like they need to be doing, keeping them up at night and really preventing them to go to sleep. Or they're having trouble staying asleep. So maybe they're having an okay time falling asleep, maybe not. But then once they're asleep, you know, they're waking up every couple of hours, they're looking at the clock, and once they're awake, they're having a hard time falling back asleep again. And so this is a really common experience of anyone who's having anxiety, and a really important one to mention to your doctor. The challenging thing about it is the better sleep we get, the better our anxiety is. So it's one of those symptoms that we really want to work on, and it's something that you'll work on in therapy, and something I really hope to cover in a future video. Now, the next few symptoms that I'm going to talk about fit more with specific anxiety disorders. The other symptoms that we've talked to you about previous to this could be common among any of the anxiety disorders, regardless of what you're experiencing, whereas these ones tend to fit into the more specific categories that you would recognize in the DSM, or perhaps you've heard about them elsewhere. So the next symptom on that list then is panic attacks. Now, panic attacks can happen regardless of which anxiety disorder you're experiencing, but they're more common around things like panic disorder, or also agoraphobia, or if anyone's experiencing any issues with leaving their home or being in bigger crowds of people. And so the telltale signs of having a panic attack are a lot of those really common anxiety symptoms that we've already talked about, the racing heart rate, a flooding of thoughts of worry and feeling of doom, and it's a very sudden, overwhelming feeling that things are not okay, this is not going to turn out well, and that I need to be safe right this moment. So it's almost like those anxiety symptoms that we've already talked about on overdrive. People will often describe feeling like they have a lot of trouble breathing, that there's a real heaviness on their chest as though they can't take that breath. And the thoughts are, all encompassing. There's nothing else that you can think about. It's impossible to think of anything else. Racing heart rate, I think I mentioned that. Feeling, a lot of people too will actually go to the hospital thinking that they're having a heart attack. They're thinking there's something absolutely physically wrong with me in this moment, and it turns out they're having a panic attack. So while I did say that panic attacks do happen and can happen if you're experiencing generalized anxiety or other anxiety disorders, they can also just happen in isolation on their own without having that general experience of anxiety, and that's more what we would consider being a panic disorder. So that's another kind of differentiation to make when you're talking to your mental health professional or your doctor about your symptoms. The next symptom on our list is avoiding social situations. This is common with anyone who experiences an anxiety disorder, but it can be more common or, to a more extreme extent with someone who experiences something like social anxiety disorder. With this symptom, it's often associated with or kind of a reflection of how the person is feeling about themselves, and can be associated with, feelings of lower self-esteem or lower self-worth. And so how that plays out is that, going to social situations can be really intimidating. You have this fear of embarrassment or fear of being scrutinized, or as though you're just not good enough. What you have to talk about is not good enough for the crowd of people that you'll be interacting with. And it can really impact somebody's ability to interact or to, kind of maintain or create new social interactions or social connections with other people. So what this might look like is somebody that comes across as really shy, or they're not really talkative in a group, or they don't go out of their way to approach new people or to speak with new people when they're in a group of others, whereas they can maybe feel a little more comfortable with people they're more familiar with or their friends. But it even happens in situations when you're in a friendly group that, people will say, I don't feel like what I have to contribute is that interesting, or if I'm going to say something, I want it to be worthwhile, and I don't really have much to contribute, and I don't feel comfortable with it, and so I just don't say anything. Some of those other symptoms of anxiety that I talked about before, like the racing thoughts or loss of concentration, those types of things can also come up in these social situations, which can leave people feeling totally dumbfounded about, what do I say next? I've totally frozen in that situation. I can't even come up with words or something interesting to say. Then I go home at the end of the night and I end up thinking about it. So that's that excessive worrying symptom coming up again, where they might think, oh, I had all these things I could have said and I just totally blew it. They're not going to want to spend time with me anymore. They're not going to invite me out the next time. And so, you can see how some of these anxiety symptoms, yes, they happen outside of social context, but with anyone who's experiencing that fear or that worry or that avoidance of social situations, they're even more common when they're related to other people. Now, the other way this can come off as other than just being like someone who presents himself as very shy, can almost be like a social aloofness or somebody who doesn't really seem to care. And I think that that's one of the most heartbreaking things, for me at least as a clinician, when a client will say, I really want to make connections, I really want to have these friends, and I would like to be able to, just be myself in these social situations and let people see me. But I come off like I don't care. I come off like a snob, or I worry that they think that I don't like them. And that might be how they're presenting themselves, because that's how their anxiety is kind of manifesting in the moment. And it's a really, really difficult one for people to experience, when in reality, they're just being incredibly highly critical of themselves, and it's coming off the wrong way. And the last symptom of anxiety we're going to talk about today is irrational fears. Now, irrational fears fit into the category of phobias, and phobias look like two things: either a fear of a specific thing or a fear of a situation. So that might look like, if it's a thing, a fear of dogs, a fear of needles, a fear of hurricanes, natural disasters that might happen. spiders. There's a whole range of things that people tend to be afraid of, and a lot of them tend to be obviously related to your safety or your fear of, something bad happening as a result of them. And the other would be a fear of situations. So it might be a fear of elevators, or a fear of, being in large crowds, or a fear of flying on an airplane. Now, for anyone who experiences a phobia, typically people don't go and seek help unless it's really getting in the way of their lives. For myself, I definitely have a fear of heights, but other than the one time that I did trapeze swinging at a festival, my fear of heights doesn't come up too often or really get in my way of functioning day to day. Whereas if you have a fear of dogs, crossing paths with the dog, or you might end up, dating somebody who has a dog, or say, for example, a fear of needles where you're needing to get a vaccination or get blood work done, those things that, come up on a more common or typical basis, frequent basis, those are the types of things that people often go to seek therapy for, to be able to get help with. Wonderful thing is that therapy is incredibly effective, especially exposure therapy, at helping clients to overcome their different phobias. So I highly recommend it. It's probably not the first thing you want to do, to imagine, exposing yourself to your fears. But if you are ready to do that, I can promise you that, and I don't promise very often, but I can promise you that it's well worth the work, and it can be very, very, very effective. Now, if you're interested in seeing some of the modern exposure treatments for phobias or specific phobias, check out our video that we're going to be posting at the end of this month, because it's going to be our anxiety month. And stay tuned for that video, because we're going to be doing a video on virtual reality and how virtual reality can actually be used to put people in specific situations to confront their phobias. And Janie will actually be, showing us some of these virtual reality programs and how they work. So if you're interested in that and you'd like a chance to check that out, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check back with us at the end of the month for that. So today I have covered the top 11 symptoms of anxiety that people often experience if they are experiencing an anxiety disorder. And that'll be a checklist very similar to what either your mental health professional or your doctor would be covering with you in an appointment when they're trying to do an assessment for that. Like I said, this video does not at all, diagnose you with an anxiety disorder, or, I can't provide you with an assessment over a video. However, I definitely recommend that you go talk with your professional, make an appointment, and, take a list of some of these things that I've talked about today, and, check them off and say, this is what I'm experiencing, and, go for it. Because my experience has been is that people really tend to downplay the symptoms that they're experiencing, and instead of saying, this is genuinely anxiety, I know that this is something, they tend to blame themselves and say, well, I'm not, I should be able to handle this better, or it's not as bad as I think it is. So let me assure you, you probably have anxiety. If you think you do, listen to your body. You know yourself better than anybody else. And anxiety can happen on a continuum. So, there's a range from, mild anxiety all the way to extreme anxiety. And it's just worth having that conversation, because, one of the biggest steps and one of the first places that I start with my clients with working with anxiety is on acceptance and understanding your body, and just, kind of saying, yes, this is me. I have anxiety. And I think that that's a really healthy place for people to start, so that they're able to then take the steps that they need to take in order to overcome anxiety. And that's definitely something that I'm going to be covering in our next video on, if you know that you've got anxiety, what do you do about it? So stay tuned for that. Now, for quick resources, I'm including a link to Anxiety Canada. They are an amazing resource for both children and adult kind of like tips and tools and all kinds of things. So I would say have a look at that. And I'm also going to be including a link down below to a cheat sheet of all of these symptoms, so that you can watch the video, you can then check off the ones that you think that you might have, and take that into your doctor and say, this is what I'm working with, and then have the conversation from there. And it will be really helpful, so that if you worry that you might miss something in your appointment, that you're coming in prepared. So for all of you out there who do have anxiety, who experience this on a daily or a consistent basis, I want to know, what is something that you have learned about anxiety? What is something that you think other people would really like to know about their anxiety that might be helpful for them? So please leave a comment in the comment section below, where others can chat with you. And I'd love to create a little community on here where we're all talking about these different things, and being a support for one another. If you thought this video was helpful, don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like or a thumbs up, and let me know, so it helps me make more videos like this. We're doing our anxiety series right now, so if there's any topics that you would like us to cover, send us an email or you can comment below, and I would love to have more ideas of things that you think would be really helpful. I thought it was really important to start at the beginning here and even just talk about what the heck is anxiety, but it's really important to know what it is that you guys want to hear about. Our offices are located in Burnaby and North Vancouver, so if you are interested in seeing one of our counselors, don't hesitate to go to our website, and I'll put a link for that down below, and you can go up to the top right corner and click book online. One of our counselors would be really happy to work with you. We love to be social and be a source of positive, informative messages online. So check out our Instagram at parallelwellness.ca or our Facebook site at the same name. And don't forget to like, subscribe so that you are able to learn about workshops and all the information and events that are going on with Parallel Wellness. And come back to check out our next video on the fight, flight, and freeze response and how to stop it, because that's what you want to know about, right? You're not going to want to miss it. We'll see you in the next video.